welcome. Keeping up with the Joneses and other APT threats. So I started doing the presentation. I was, wondering who this was for, and it's mostly for blue teamers. Red teamers are certainly welcome. Red teamers may poke some holes inside the blue team here. It's supposed to be a technical talk. If in fact you are management, there will be something for you as well. So with that being said, keeping up with the Joneses and other APT threats, we're constantly being, security is a changing field all the time. You need to keep up with threats. And that's what this talk's about, trying to give you some ideas. All right, who am I? I'm 22 years in security, blue team, mostly blue team. I spent some time in Japan. I spent 4 years working in Japan. So you'll see some actually JP Cert, some references there. They've got some good stuff coming out from them. I've been working with Splunk for the last 5 years. It's not every day that I align myself with the technology, but I certainly like to use Splunk. So we're going to cover over a whole bunch of stuff with Splunk this morning. I'm a father of 3. I'm coaching hockey. Otaku means geek in Japanese. I certainly like Sysmon, and I'm on the blue team. So to get started, this first screenshot is, as you can see, is running as NT authority system. One of these things that you want to be aware of is the fact that whenever somebody runs Who Am I's system in your network, in all the endpoints that you protect, you certainly want to investigate that. There's a Splunk command down at the bottom. It's as simple as that. I'm not going to break out all these Splunk commands, but it's really quite simple. And that's what I want to start off with, just starting off simple. Today's agenda, I know everyone could be wearing jammies or no pants, really depends. I know we've all kind of lived through this since March. Here's the agenda. A monitor first paradigm. I used to, I've been in security for 22 years. I've kind of resonated with a monitor first paradigm, and we'll get into that. Responding to CVEs in a quick fashion, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about patching in a quick manner, how data moves in your environment, and attribution and forensics do matter in the places you'll go. Like I said, as I started doing this presentation, I realized that this is probably going to be a little bit of a personal journey. So bear with me and let's take the journey. All right, the monitoring first paradigm. I resonated with Richard Baitlich. This was a tweet back in January. And he actually referred back to Bruce Schneier here. Bruce Schneier actually met back in 2000. I had a chance to, I just met him randomly at Black Hat, and I certainly have followed Bruce Schneier a bit as well. But a monitoring first paradigm is when my boss or my CIO comes to me and says, are we protected? Can we do this? Can we take our business in this down this road? Can we move to the cloud? Well, I always think first, well, can we monitor that? Can we monitor before we can do anything, before we decide any the security risks or mechanisms? So that certainly resonates with what Richard Baitlich said, Bruce Schneier. The bullet point here is how does the CI know what security products to install and whether they are working? Having a monitoring first paradigm and monitoring and having that visibility allows you to decide what technologies do you need and where are you weak. It's something that everyone can do. It's something that a network administrator can do today to provide immediate value to your organization. What it also allows you to do is permits a baseline. You can distinguish what's normal and what isn't normal in your environment. And what I've also found too for the management people in the presentation here is it can establish real risk. You can actually determine what is real risky in your environment. So security monitoring is not some of these things. Again, some of these mistakes were made in the past by myself. Again, this is part of a personal journey. I certainly like the sign on the right. This is my ideas. I'm just sharing my ideas. I certainly like B-sides. I like the community. I think it's just a matter of sharing, and that's the whole purpose of my presentation today, is to share ideas, and hopefully this is valuable to you. Security monitoring to me is not monitoring just your perimeter firewall logs. Everyone is thank you for that. It's not about just grabbing your perimeter logs. You want to be looking at your endpoint logs. Endpoint logs is exactly where all the action happens. I know AJ Lease was just talking about incident response. You definitely want to have all your logs in place. You don't want to create logs on the fly. You definitely want to be collecting your endpoint logs. If you've invested enough in protection, you don't need sound detection. That simply is not true. It's been a way of thinking for quite some time now. All right, perfect is the enemy of good. Let's just start off with that. I'm just encouraging you to get started. Again, I think if you're just relying on your AV in your environment, you're in trouble. This should not be news to anybody, but if you're certainly just relying on antivirus, you need to do more. You need to actually be monitoring and detecting what's truly going on in your endpoints. Some monitoring best values. These are some of the things that I've done in the past and recently that have proven to be good value. Who am I? System, we've already discussed that. Logs being cleared on your endpoints, something you want to take a look at, something you want to know about. The W-Digest changes, attackers, there's a lot of red teamers here at a security conference. They're flipping the bit on the W-Digest registry change. What this does is allow clear text passwords and Mimikatz. So if this registry setting is being flipped, you want to know about that. PowerShell is being used to download stagers and more executable content, throwing stuff in memory. You want to see exactly what's happening in your PowerShell. We're going to cover more of that in detail. You want to see every CMD. You want to see every command that's run in your environment. Wouldn't that be awesome stuff? You want to monitor any whitelisting products that you might have in place. You want to be able to troubleshoot any whitelisting issues that you might have. If you're rolling that out across the organization, you want to know about when your app blocker or whatever whitelisting technology you're using is blocking. Windows Defender application control and attack surface reduction. These are all Microsoft technologies that you can roll out, but you need a logging infrastructure in place so that you can actually monitor for some of these things. You want to be looking for RDP hijack. Again, a lot of these things are probably being covered with different speakers today. I certainly already enjoyed Evil Mog already this morning. I'm looking forward to a couple other talks, the rest of the day and tomorrow. You want to be looking for net use commands, anything that's net based in your environment. One that's got some good value here is 5 critical processes in 10 minutes. You'll be able to see the syntax of that later on. Look for application crashes. This is good for your help desk. You can actually be proactive. You could actually call up a user and say, hey, look, I've noticed that your system's got all these application crashes. Can we help you fix this particular program? Another big one here is east-west traffic, client-server traffic, usually north-south. Your endpoints don't usually talk to each other. You want to be able to determine what is good and what isn't normal east-west traffic. A couple other things here, just a couple more slides on this. Explicit credential logon is excellent. It's a Windows security event coming from your Windows log. 4648 is when someone does a run as command on your Windows box, or they simply use, again, a different set of credentials on that particular box to log into another box, typically defining lateral movement. A couple other good things here is LSAS process access and LSAS file created. A file that's being dumped from LSAS might be indications of a password dumper. Again, it's been mentioned earlier already in the conference by AJ. You don't want to look for new tasks, services, accounts created. These are all kind of given things. You really do need to look for them. One thing that I like, and again, Sysmon was mentioned, is a new process and then a network connection outbound to the internet. It certainly is a good value alert to be notified about. Having visibility into your endpoints, you can determine all the macros that have been run in your environment. I don't know anybody else, but trying to disable macros in a business environment is extremely difficult. And where you start, if you have the logging infrastructure set up, there's some good ways that you can actually determine what macros are being run and who's running them. WMI is another form of persistence by malware and attackers. You want to be able to see your WMI across your network. I've already talked about system crashes, Windows, Ceph, and Utilman. A common way to pop out the password on boxes where people might have physical access. We look for that. Use logon. When our user logs on to multiple hosts, again, these are all just ideas. I do have some syntax for you later on in the presentation. And again, as you mature in this process, your little monitoring setup that you've done and gaining visibility into your environment, you're going to start applying the MITRE attack matrix to your detection mechanisms. You're going to maybe follow the kill chain, the Lockheed Martin kill chain. You might actually incorporate that some into your detection. Some other best values that we've done, we use a tool called auto runs from sysinternals. We actually auto run and check every auto extensible start point in our environment on every endpoint. So quite extensive there. We also check every binary against VirusTotal. It'd be nice, to know that every binary that's running in your organization, just want to get a second opinion get a second opinion from VirusTotal if in fact this is legit or not. Okay, I've talked about a bunch of tools and stuff for things. How do we actually get this done? This talk is not on Sysmon or Splunk in this case. There's been so many talks about that. This is not going to be doing that. But if you do need to get started, Sysmon, highly recommended. Mark Rusinovich, who's the CTO of Microsoft's Azure, he still maintains Sysmon. I know you can hit him up on Twitter if there's anything wrong with Sysmon. It's actively maintained. It's running at version 12, and new features keep coming out version after version. With Sysmon, you need a filtering type of a program. You need a filter to collect all the logs. If you just turn Sysmon on, you're going to be enveloped with just too many logs. So highly recommend the filter file from Olaf Hartung. Olaf has done quite a bit with Sysmon and Splunk, and he's certainly someone you'd like to follow. I put Swift on security here as a tweet. Swift has also done a lot. She's got her own filter up there, and those are kind of the two de facto filters that you want to apply with Sysmon. Free tools, Splunk. Like I said earlier, I don't usually align myself with a vendor, but Splunk is just a fantastic tool. It's called SPL Splunk Processing Language. If you're familiar with, oh gosh, I grew up with DOS, but if you're familiar with running things in DOS or PowerShell from the command line, and just even piping in general, from Linux as well, Splunk has just got a great SPL, it's called, great command line. Splunk also provides you a couple dashboards here. Splunk Security Essentials is free. You can fire up a Splunk trial. You're allowed to have 500 megabytes per day of data coming in. When we first started monitoring endpoints, we set a limit for 10 megabytes on every endpoint. So with a Splunk free trial, you have 500 megabytes per day. That leaves you with 49 or 50 endpoints of logs that you can pull in and at least try this out and get it working. Another thing I want to mention is the threat hunting app for Splunk. It was created by Olaf Hartung again, a free app. You just install that into your Splunk instance. Now he's actually integrated that with the attack MITRE matrix. So a lot of that is done for you. So highly recommended. I did a VirusTotal integration with Splunk talk back in 2017. I guess that was the last B-sides. I was one of the organizers back then. So, but I did a day workshop, and if you want to go to, these slides are still there, and there's some files there to actually give you some information on how to integrate virus total right into your Splunk instance and automate that and send every hash from every executable that's run in your environment and send that up to virus total for a second guess. For our auto runs, we're using a thing from Planter. It's an auto runs to win event log. It's a PowerShell script. Definitely want to send you that way. Palantir, yeah, they are. It's a great script. It's worked very well. We've automated this. There's absolutely no issues. It runs like a top. Now, if you wanted to set up your entire environment, Chris Long here has created what is called a detection lab. You can actually spin up an entire set of VMs. You've got a DC, I believe, actually just spin up a server, install Splunk. You have a VM that's just mimics the workstation, and it loads a lot of these tools up automatically for you. Chris has poured a lot of time and effort into this detection lab. Highly recommended if you're just starting out. All right, so monitoring examples. Let's get into let's get into the deep stuff here. So again, I resonated with this particular tweet. Basically there's two tools out there they're going to be often used by I think a lot of the red teamers that are out there. What struck me was the Talos security paper here by Cisco. They have identified a lot of the malware authors are now using Cobalt Strike, and they're just using it. Certainly the usage of Cobalt Strike has gone up. Of course, Mimikatz is something that we're all aware of, and we've got to be able to detect Mimikatz. So we're going to take a quick look at how do we detect these two popular tools that are being used by malware. Kyle is on the line, and Kyle, thanks for mentioning Cobalt Strike. Source code was leaked. Did not know that. I'm looking forward to Kyle's talk. I think it's this afternoon. Where mine leaves off, I think Kyle's is going to pick up. So we haven't coordinated any of this, but I just have that feeling. So let's just dive deep into PowerShell. What we need to do to set up PowerShell first, and then how can we actually detect some Cobalt Strike. One of the things you want to do is certainly enable script logging. That doesn't happen by default. You want to block outbound PowerShell with Windows Host Firewall. Without the visibility into all of our endpoints, we certainly wouldn't have been able. I wouldn't have been able to convince management that we need to turn on, outbound firewall, PowerShell outbound. Highly effective, blocks a lot of malware. We'll look at the syntax here in a second. Constrained language mode. PowerShell has a thing called language modes. If you can put it into constrained language modes, some of the deep.NET stuff is limited, and you can actually use application Windows app blocker to get it into constrained language mode. Here's some ideas to monitor for. It's not a be-all, end-all. Just a word of warning. There's some tips here on how to monitor PowerShell. It's not a be-all, end-all, and I'll show you the weaknesses in some of this monitoring. So you want to look for abnormally long PowerShell, base 64 for sure. PowerShell outbound, PowerShell spawned CMD. This was by Symantec actually in 2017. I don't know how accurate that is anymore, but you want to see PowerShell spawning CMD. You want to look for a suspicious command line. And here's some ideas that have paid dividends for us. You want to be looking for event code 4103 and 4104 from the PowerShell log. This is a completely different PowerShell log. It's the Windows PowerShell log. You want to be looking for event code 400. And we also use Sysmon. Sysmon tells us when PowerShell has been started. Here's a way to block PowerShell outbound on your firewalls. There's a couple of ways to do that. In the bottom, you can see that's the actual rule itself. You can do that through GPOs. Highly recommend to do this through GPOs. And you want to make sure that you're not allowing your local admins on workstations to change firewall rules. The bottom example blocks everything except for the 10./8 network. And the example on the right blocks everything except for the 10. For the RFC 1918 addresses, they are allowed out as well. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, how do we actually determine cobalt strike? You have to read that white paper. There's some good indications there. Practice this with your red team. Certainly get the logs that you need to and go from there. One that pays dividends for us is looking for anything with the IO memory stream. We look for that in various places. We look for a new service being started, which is event 7045. There's the event code there. That's a new service has been started. Keep in mind that PowerShell is actually system management automation.dll. We look for sysmon image load event code 7. We look for some of that in an environment. You want to be able to baseline some of that and see what's normal in your environment. This next one is we use auto runs. Auto runs sometimes will tell us exactly the PowerShell syntax that's being run, whether it's a service startup, whether it's a task, whether it's a schedule task. We'll actually see all of this. So these are some of the verbs that you're going to be looking for. I think if you're not aware, Daniel Boheman, he's the guy that speaks at Black Hat and DerbyCon, and he's always obfuscating PowerShell. So you can see the downfall here. These verbs are just not going to catch everything. You need to be using extreme regex. And here's a good example of looking for encoded command in PowerShell. I saw this the other day, and I was really quite happy to see that and impressed. I don't know Spashly, but I know she's speaking at the Sans Defer conference that's coming up here real soon. All right, Mimikatz detection. These are just some of the things that we use to detect. Explicit credential logon will help us. We've already covered that earlier. I will cover that in a second. Debug is assigned to logon, debug user right, LSAS file created, and LSAS process access. It's not a be-all, end-all, but it certainly will slow the malware down, or let's say it's an attacking team. Somebody's landed on your network, but remove all workstations from SE debug and SE create token privilege. I'm giving you stuff here that works in an environment. It's worked in our environment. There is absolutely no reason why our workstations need SE debug or create token priv. I mean, we had to go through that slowly and methodically, but we determined you can in fact remove that. So how does that help? Mimikatz requires debug in order to do a lot of its magic. The attacker still can simply run as local system, as we've noticed, and they might run who am I. Hopefully we'll detect them, and they'll just give themselves debug privilege. But at least there's more detection mechanisms that we can search for. Here is something here. So this is the explicit credential logon 4648. You want to be looking for process names that are like this. So if you're seeing somebody logging in with Wimic or PowerShell or even CMD, chances are that's not good. The debug user right, we look for the security log for event code 4704. We're looking for the user right SE debug. This identifies when the debug privilege is being used. Another one we look for is the 4672 in security. Oh, pardon, yes, it's in security as well. And you want to, when a user logs in with the 4672, you're going to actually see the SE debug privilege being assigned to that login. So we follow up with those as well. Another thing that you could be looking for is when LSAS does a sysmon file create, which is event ID 11. You're going to see that. So password dumpers from LSAS, you might see the output of a file created. I want to recommend Semir Boussaidin. I butchered his name, but go to his GitHub there. He's got a lot of examples, and Olaf Hartong as well, a lot of examples. You saw the link earlier on exactly how to detect Mimikatz in your environment. So as a blue team, you want to make sure that you're detecting some of these popular tactics. This is InfoSec advice. It may be good for your environment, it may not be, just like these images are. But I'm sharing this again because this has worked for us. Monitor for W digest, we've talked about that. Remove SE debug and create token privilege. We've done that across our environment. That works. Windows host-based firewall definitely has to get done. We started with inbound restrictions first, and then we moved on to outbound restrictions. PowerShell outbound restrictions for sure. It's just simply not needed in your environment. I heard a talk the other day by Jason Fossen. He's a SANS instructor. He teaches the SEC 505 PowerShell course, and there's just no reason for PowerShell outbound connections. But anyways, follow Jason. Listen to what Jason has to say regarding PowerShell. When we were doing prevention, we noticed we're pulling in all these logs. Some of the things that jumped out at us were LLMNR, the name resolution for home computers, for Windows home computers. It's simply not needed in a corporate environment. Just incredibly chatty and noisy. So you're going to realize that, hey, all this stuff can be disabled. Let's just disable it, and there'll be no implications. NetBIOS, SMB v1, Evil Mog was talking this morning about NTLM, and you want to make sure that you're getting rid of all these older base protocols. Samaritan was a PowerShell script put out by the guys that create the ATA server for Microsoft. That particular tool can be run on workstations and servers. It blocks the ability for net session. Net session allows an attacker to enumerate sort of who's got sessions on every single box in your environment, and it tries to neuter a bloodhound and tools like that. All right, deny access to this computer from the network. Built-in administrators, we restrict access to endpoints, very, very restricted. Our east-west traffic is very, very minimal. Highly recommended, and it's very doable. Now, what I've learned in the last few years is certainly you're going to have monitoring gaps, and you need to be looking at automation, and you need to be validating your detection mechanism. So let's just start off. I had mentioned here with Olaf and Swift on security, they have some filtering for Sysmon. You want to make sure that you're collecting the right information. You want to be able to detect a malicious attack on your systems. I'm going to say Olaf's stuff. He's done a lot of research, and so has Swift. Use those configs as learning tools. What you want to do then is the next one here is the attack navigator. Certainly you want to get into that. I know Olaf Hartong, again, has done quite a bit of work on attack navigator, and you can actually build that right into your system. I was in the Boss of the SOC training on Tuesday. They actually mentioned Tim Fraser's stuff here as well, adversary simulation. It just allows you to attack, let's say, an endpoint in your environment, and you can make sure that your detection mechanisms are, in fact, working. I want to do a shout out here to Red Canary. When I first picked this stuff up, it was so easy and simple to use. And here's a couple of examples. Invoke atomic test T1117. That is an attack matrix TTP. You can, bam, just test that against your endpoint, and away you go. It was really simple and easy to use. Another one that I've used is the APT simulator by Nextron Systems. Florian Roth is the guy. Highly recommended you attack your workstations. Make sure you've got coverage. Make sure that's working. Do that on a regular basis, weekly or monthly if you can, and automate that, because that's going to take up some time. As a blue team defender, you're always constantly, your environment is changing. Machines are being patched. Things are being updated. The parsing, you've got a lot of things to keep in mind. Rules might be changed inadvertently. You definitely want to automate some of this to keep up to speed. So the gaps is you definitely want to stay up on things, and this is where you can fill in some of the gaps. I'm just giving you some examples here. So FireEye puts out an MTrends thing, an annual report, but you can just read the report and you can see the MITRE attack techniques that were very popular that they've seen. You want to make sure that you are detecting in your environment at least these particular tactics. and techniques. So very good. They go down into details and give you details. I'm going to refer to this Cisco Cobalt Strike Talos thing. Yeah, there's an artifact that you can certainly look there for IO memory stream, and look for that in many places, and fine tune your whatchamacallit, your detection mechanisms. This just came out. This was a recent one I just read. It was a ruck speed run, 2 hours to ransomware. They're using Cobalt Strike, 80 fine Rubius. Just make sure that, a great read. This was a great read, highly recommended. If you read that, make sure that you've got coverage and you can detect these types of things. Another one here I'm just adding is Checkpoint. This particular one is just disabling Windows Defender. If you're running Windows Defender in your environment, geez, we could do another talk just on Windows Defender. The topic would be defending Defender. If you're running Defender, make sure that you, in fact, are defending it as well. The next one here is CVE responses. I mentioned this in the agenda. What I found is, as we've matured and we've got a good detection and visibility, and my boss comes to me and says, hey, look, do we have this Internet Explorer exploit, this CVE 2020-0674? I mean, are we actually exposed to that? How quickly do we need to patch? Well, I could simply do a search for JScript.dll. It was found in this particular Windows Code Integrity operational log. It's event ID 3076. I was able to go through our environment and come back and say, yeah, no, we don't use it very often. These are the endpoints that do use it, and we need to start patching these as a priority. Another example is the CVE 2020-061. The elliptical curve cryptography one. I'm kind of drawing a blank on it. Anyways, we used event ID 7 to do that. This last one here, just absolutely scary, a CVSS score of 10. Your domain name system servers, when they fail to properly handle requests, you actually needed to get that done absolutely immediately and very, very quickly. That was application ID 1 if you wanted to see if, in fact, anybody was doing anything fishy with your DNS servers. And there's the actual search syntax for that, and some regex there. I like regex. I can't wait for some other talks here, and hope to gain some more regex. I love this picture. I just love this picture. You got a problem. You got a problem if you can't patch sort of immediately. Andrew Robbins, guy, one of the creators of Bloodhound. You have to prioritize patching. Sometimes, detection isn't just enough. You just need to get some of these things done. So I resonated with this tweet. That's why it's in here. Your patching person is key. You want to make sure that they are your best friend in getting these patches done as quickly as possible. Just a reminder here that the net logon, or also known as zero logon vulnerability, you need to be monitoring for that, and you need to be looking in your Windows event log system. You're looking for these particular codes. It's actually in audit mode right now, and Microsoft will be explicitly blocking this sometime in January or February. So make sure you're monitoring for the net logon vulnerability. Again, another shout out for Splunk here. I just wanted to show this. It's called a sand key diagram. In the lower right here, it's not a great snapshot, sorry. But on the left is a system. You can see it's system 24. It was reaching out to 4 other systems. It was doing east-west traffic, very, very easy to detect as an investigator. You want to have these daily visuals pop out at you and say, hey, look, there's a problem here. This is not normal. And you can do that with SandKey from Splunk. As a member of the Blue Team, you need to know how traffic moves in your network, and you can do that with these tools. Sysmon, Event ID 3 is network connections all over the place. So you want to be monitoring for your traffic. When I first, again, this is a personal journey. When we first sort of gained visibility and stuff like that, we were like, Yeah, this is great. We started seeing stuff that we didn't normally see, and we were able to do investigations. So we do investigations on anything and everything that comes into our environment. If AV blocks something, you want to research that out. Why did AV block it? How did it get in the first place? And what do we need to do to prevent that so that AV is not our last line of defense? I resonated with this one from Paul Milson. Sorry to be glib, but if you're not doing investigating, then you need to be on a thread negotiating with ransomware crews, and that's the thread for you. And another thing I wanted to talk on was attribution matters and forensics matters. So again, AJ, that was a talk I saw this morning. He talked about doing incident response and malware analysis. So stuff like that does matter. And then Jessica Payne, this was basically 3 years ago, but if you're actually not monitoring for well-documented technique publicly out there, you need to be. We just talked about that. We talked about that with Cole Strike and Mimi Katz as a couple of examples. That leads into the next slide, though. When I first started out with this, I was thinking attribution. Attribution is really, really hard, and or it used to be. But when we do our investigations, we're a simple company. We have a simple business. We didn't need to detect, as a management decision, we didn't need to detect who was attacking us. We just didn't have the time for attribution, or even the motivation behind some of the attacks that we see. So we kind of stopped on this pyramid, the hierarchy of needs from Matt Swan over at Microsoft. I really do appreciate Matt sharing his stuff. And again, he was on a journey too. He hasn't tweeted out much lately, but same thing with us. Can you detect your adversary activity within your environment? And that's kind of like the behavior and even the hunt level we're at. But we wouldn't dive deep into, threat intel. But this is where I said earlier, I think the talk by Kyle later on this afternoon, I think Kyle's going to be certainly talking about using threat intel and going deep. And to me, this was a natural progression to get to this point. So we're really at the point where, we do want to know what attribution is. Our investigations seem not sufficient. We kind of close the incident. We say, yeah, this certainly was a thing. We know how it came in. We know how it was blocked. We know how it stopped. But for me on my journey, threat intelligence and sharing is really the next few steps for us to get to that top of that pyramid. All right, so places you're going to go. I'm just going to cover this tweet on the right. This was by Jessica. This was probably her experience when they do monitoring. And she suggests here this led to lapse, at least to jump servers, firewalls, and whitelisting. So we certainly experienced that. We also experienced app locker. We also experienced Windows Defender application control. We disabling Java in our environment now. A nice bonus. Macro inventory. I've talked about that earlier. You can actually determine macros run in your environment. There's some tips in the appendix, so be sure to download the presentation, and that will be available later on. We can determine data flows in our environment. We can answer questions immediately about a CVE's impact on our environment immediately, and we can actually plan for patching and not just react. We can categorize and review the techniques that allow the malware to get in, and we can actually then plan. So this is what I'm talking about, real risk. You're actually seeing the real risk on where the rubber hits the road. You're seeing the malware that comes in, whether it's through phishing, through email, or through user downloads, or very rarely in our environment through a USB. But you can actually determine exactly what has come in to your environment. Places you'll go, part 2. You need to validate your logs with open source tools. I've given you some of that already. We're requiring and monitoring code signing. We're just doing that because we can deploy some of these code signing technologies, Windows Defender application control, app locker. They all rely on code signing. So we're demanding, outside of our organization, anybody who wants to do business with us, your code has to be signed. That was a surprise. We're increasing the security in our suppliers and our vendor maintenance. We're kind of going down that road a bit more now. Threat intelligence and community sharing, I kind of talked about that already. And that's kind of the next steps for us. I'll let you take a read on this comic. this one I just kind of resonated with. Again, our end users are sometimes feel invincible, I think. So I guess, why are we doing this? You know, security, the blue team deserves to see all the malware that your users are installing. You know what I've noticed over the few years here is let your users know that you can identify patient zero. You don't have to, you can do it very subtly, and they kind of get the message that they're realizing that, hey, oh geez, if I download this stuff, this guy is going to be able to figure out that landed on my machine, and then it's spread throughout the entire network. So you can let them know subtly, and you'll actually see gradual change. There's a couple of things you can do. Every hash in your environment, I mentioned before, the tools should be there for you. You can get changes approved faster, security changes. Be sure that you fight back. You know, AJ again talked about you know, quarantining your systems. Make sure that you do have a quarantine. We have an OU and an Active Directory. We're quarantining machines. We still have access to them to pull memory and to do our investigations. But be sure to fight back. Be sure you send them in a block all outbound connectivity. You're going to be able to show real numbers that support risk. And I have a quick question for you guys. I don't know who has done the KRBTGT password reset. That's kind of the end of the presentation. I just want to say thank you. If you guys can take a quick second to say that you have reset the password, you're thinking about it, or what is the KRBTGT account. If you guys can let me know. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Slides and the URLs will be available. I've got some more stuff coming up here in the appendices. So you'll want to take a look at that stuff. Thanks for joining. And KRBTGT, if you guys have any any feedback, that's great. Thanks.